Okay, it looks like we're live, and for some reason, picture looks darker than it did earlier. Same lights, nothing's changed. But so before I say much else, I want to say right off the bat, if you lose me, please let me know in chat immediately. If you can't, not just that I'm frozen, if there's like absolutely nothing, no, there's no picture, no sound, or you can see me and there's nothing going on, let me know right away. I have a backup stream ready to go just in case, so it won't take me as long to get going on a second stream. Just remember that I will let you know in the chat, and I will, once I get it going, I will come over here and I will link to that new stream in the chat so that you know right where to go. But you have to either back out and watch for it or go to the link that I put in there. And maybe if I forget the link, maybe Deb or one of my other mods that come in here can make sure that they gather that link, come over the chat and put it in there. But then again, once it's ended, you can't add to the chat. So I'll have to do it before I end. I'll have to remember to do it before I end the chat. In fact, I tell you what I'm going to do. Well, no, I can't. I don't think I can do that right now. So anyway, hello all. Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. Even when YouTube boots us off our live and we have to keep starting over and it's super, super annoying, like happened earlier. At least it only happened once earlier. And hopefully it won't happen at all for the next hour. We'll see. But at least I'm ready to go with a second one. So we'll get into the topic here in about 2-3 minutes. I'm trying to get to where I just streamline it a bit more to help cut the time, because that, I think, helps reduce the chances of us getting cut off. And I do hope that YouTube fixes their problem, because I think it's YouTube. I don't think it's my service. My Starlink has been good. I was having no issues with it. And I don't see it losing connection when these things happen. So it sounds like it's from YouTube's end. Anyway, we will be talking about grains and storage and a bit more, and just kind of chatting about some of this stuff. And I'll be answering a few questions about that, if I can properly answer them as they come in. But before I start, I'll show you real quick. Totally off topic. So Jace, he's going to be 3, and he has really, in the past few months, gotten to where he absolutely loves to be read to. That's all he wants to do. First thing he does when he gets brought in, straight to the books, grabs a book and brings it to one of us so we can read to him. And he tends to, you've even had your OSB cut out. I've thought about getting the OSB. I had it with my original live streams years ago, but I haven't bothered to download it. I know it's nice because you can add photos and all that way, but I really didn't want to hassle with an extra thing. So yeah, I wondered if having OSB would help, stop that from happening, but it doesn't sound like it. So anyway, I wanted to share with you what favorite books are, because he'll have his favorites. And for a couple of weeks there, it was Green Eggs and Ham, like all the time. He'd have you read it back to back to back to back. And then, after Grandpa was done reading it twice, he'd take it to Mom or to me and have me read it once or twice. And yeah, and whoever else might show up, here, read this to me again. And anyway, so I am super thrilled about this one. This has been his most recent favorite one. Ta-da! A lot of you will understand why I'm really, really glad that this is one of his current favorite books. So yeah. Anyway, anything on occasion can and will cut out. It's all about, yeah, right. So anyway, Little Red Hen, if you are a grandparent or a parent and you don't have this book, you're wrong. You got to have the Little Red Hen. That's got to be one of the top books because of the moral of the story. And then another one that I loved when I was a kid was Put Me in the Zoo. Some of you might remember this. It was part of the I Can Read series. It's not, it's not a Dr. Seuss, even though it has the picture of where is it? The cat and hat up here, because it was part of the I Can Read series. So, the thing, whatever it is, looks like a bear dog man, bear, pig, whatever it is. Anyway, another one of my favorites when I was growing up, and one of his current favorites. So that's pretty cool. He does have some others too. I bought one on the solar system. It's a little golden book, so it's this size, but it's a lot more in depth, has a lot more words. But he really likes that one too. So takes a lot longer to get through it. The little red hair. Very funny. Excuse me. Not really off to the best start today with what happened with the other live from the other channel, and then my throat is already just wanting to be done today. So I might have a little bit more coughing and stuff. So I am sorry. My vocal cords are they're not really happy with me today. I had to resubscribe to Rain Country too. So now I can watch from Ontario, Canada. Terminator, it's just a lot of people are telling me, because I can see it happening. I can see when YouTube is just wiping out subscribers. I'm like, I don't think that is intentional. I think it's AI glitches, but it's been happening to such a massive frequency on so many channels all the way across the board. It's like, are they ever going to fix this issue? It's really ridiculous. So let's talk I'm not going to talk just about grains, but I'm talking mostly about grains and mostly about the ones that I prefer to use for bread making. But I'm going to go ahead and list off my favorite grains and flours to store. So Karen Smith, I appreciate your advice, but it's not the same thing. What you might not realize is that after a lifetime, I'm going to be 59 next month, and since I was young, I was singing. And as soon as I was old enough to be a part of choirs, and I started teaching myself to play guitar, and at the age of 15, I was already leading worship in youth groups. And in high school alone, I was in, I think, 6 different singing groups, and then went to college and was in choirs there, and then started teaching dance, and that requires you to speak loudly over music. And sometimes you're kind of having to shout to make sure your students can hear you. So what we're looking at is a lifetime of wear and tear on my vocal cords that caused me to develop nodules on them in my 40s. So what happens is when they start to swell, because I'm using them, this is why I don't sing anymore. That causes, it causes the mucus then to build up on them to help coat them, because they're swollen and porous. That's the purpose of mucus. And that causes me to have to clear my throat. Plus they can get very dry and itchy. Well, not dry, but they get very, very itchy, and that will also make me cough. So yeah, so the onion in this case would have nothing to do with it, because it's actually an issue with, those nodules there, those swollen spots on the vocal cords. And I elected to never have surgery on them, because it would be a waste of money and time and pain to go through that. So anyway, I'm sorry I got off topic. So the first thing I want to do is list the types of grains and flours that I like to keep stored up. So I am not even paying attention. What's he saying? She yells at me constantly. Not true. Well, I guess I'm kind of yelling now, so maybe it is true a little bit. So obviously oats, and I like to store rolled oats rather than oat groats myself. White rice, wild rice, like the wild rice blend. I love that now and then to use I make a stuffing out of it that I like to put in turkeys and chickens. Popcorn, of course, wheat, and that would be hard white wheat. I don't like red wheat, as I stated in my last show. Barley, one of my favorites. Whole white corn. And then as far as flours, I store the organic unbleached white flour and then I'll have some gluten-free flours. And now I might consider storing like some buckwheat, hulled, because it's a pain if it's not hulled, so that I the reason I started storing them as flours is I don't have to, if I'm cooking for someone or baking for someone who's gluten free, I don't want to have to worry about cross contamination from my wheat grains. For those who cannot have gluten at all. And so I just buy the flour and keep it on hand. That's kind of easier for me. Where can you buy large quantities of rice, beans, rolled oats, and wheat? Now, for me personally, and I know Tyler already knows this, but it's a good question to put out there. I get all of mine now from Azure Standard. And now we have a drop point. So the first delivery is coming up really soon. So I don't have to pay shit. So here we get free shipping, which is excellent. So people, if you get Azure Standard and you're in other places across the states, you might have to pay a percentage for shipping. But here, because Azure Standard is in Oregon, just a state down from us, and they've been doing routes across Washington and Oregon forever. It's just that our remote little town is finally put on their map. Yeah, we don't have to pay shipping, so that's going to save me a lot. But anyway, they carry quality stuff. It's organic, it's non-GMO. They're constantly testing things and vetting things and making sure what they're getting is quality and is indeed organic and is indeed non-GMO. And I probably trust them more than any other company. Yes, all of my grains, all of my flours now I get from Azure Standard. Um, Now Costco does have a really good deal on the unbleached organic flour. You can get that there, and especially if you don't have like an Azure Standard or a drop point near you, there are some things you can get at Costco. Um, Costco isn't that close to us either. So yeah, but yeah, I've just been paying shipping because when I figured out the cost of shipping compared to where I was buying organic whole grains before, and figured that into the overall cost of the grains and what would the price be per pound. That kind of helps me because some have different sizes, like 25 pounds or 50 pounds. Then I figure out the price per pound with the shipping included. And I found that I'm either paying the same with the shipping through Azure Standard or less in most cases. Not every case. Some things are still going to be a little bit more, but now I can get free shipping. It's definitely going to be even more worth it. Yes, I've heard Sam's Club is another good place. We don't have one of the closest. The Costco is far closer to us than Sam's Club, but Costco is still 75 miles away from us. So now the two grains I use most commonly for my homemade breads and that I mill up myself are going to be the hard white wheat and the barley, and it's a blend. So it's the only visual I brought in with me, and it's a big jar. It's because it's always stays in this room right next to my grain mill, and I just refilled it. So what I do is I take my barley. Let me hold up to the camera. You might be able to see there's a variance in color and shape. The smaller, darker ones are the hard white wheat, and the fatter, lighter ones are the barley. And so I do a 50-50 blend. Now, barley is a soft grain. So barley by itself, just like soft white wheat, would work well for your pie crust, your biscuits, your more delicate things. But when it comes to making a yeast bread, you want to have a grain that is higher in gluten, which is where you're going to want your harder grains like the hard white wheat. Or if you like red wheat, you can go with hard red wheat, which I don't like red wheat. I don't like the flavor of it, never have. So hard white wheat, I've been using hard white wheat forever. I've tried mixing it with all kinds of different things and with the soft white wheat, but then decided a couple years ago, 2, 3 years ago, I switched to barley, partly because it was getting harder to get the soft white wheat. And because barley's going to have some added benefits that the wheat alone isn't going to have. just like anything else, one thing's going to have more benefits and more nutrients here, another thing's going to have more benefits and nutrients there. So some may ask if they're new, and if they're new to the whole concept of storing grains, why would I store the grains and not the flours and everything? Well, because when you're talking about your whole grains, they're going to have, for one, a much longer shelf life, mostly in the we're talking about nutrient content. Because once your whole grains have been ground into a flour, you start losing your nutrient content out of those a lot faster. And so it's best to use them as fresh as possible. So, um, what are we talking about there? Okay, I got to check every now and then, at least make sure that you guys haven't lost me again. But what was I saying? So like if you're buying your whole grain flours from the store, by the time, even if they just stocked those shelves and you bought it as soon as they stocked it, by the time it gets to the store, it's already lost quite a bit of the nutrients, because you don't even know how long it was sitting in storage before it was packaged up and then shipped to the store, how long it took to get to the store, how long was it sitting on the shelf. And so you're far better off, if you're wanting it to get the most nutrients out of your flour, to store your whole grains and then mill it up yourself. But then comes the work. So after milling, over half the nutrition is lost from wheat in 72 hours. Yeah, I couldn't remember the time frame. So thank you, Tyler, for throwing that in there. I should have looked it up again, but see, I don't have to, because I got you guys helping me out and throwing that information in there. But yeah, it doesn't last long when it comes to your grains. Now, you'll still always keep certain amount of minerals. Well, you're always going to keep your minerals. You're going to keep some of your other nutrients, but and obviously you're still going to get your carbs and the things you need for the energy. But yeah, I mean, you want to keep as many nutrients in there as possible. So I used to, when I was doing it, grinding them all by hand before Patrick hooked up the motor, I would grind up a bunch of flour, try to get as much going. So it'd take me all day. I'd go grind a little bit, grind a little bit, grind a little bit, and then I'd keep it in the freezer. But then I find that a freezer can kill nutrients as well. And sometimes you can lose more nutrients in the freezer than you can in canning goods. So I'm not sure how well freezing it now would actually preserve the nutrients. But then there's another issue when it comes to freezing, where it can be important when it comes to your whole grains. So let me talk about that first. So if you're concerned about weevils, and I don't think to do this every time, but I try to remember to do this. Every time I get a fresh bag of grains, it doesn't matter if it's popcorn, it doesn't matter if it's barley, if it's the wheat, I throw them in the freezer for 2 to 3 days. Maybe a week if it's a 50-pound bag. And yes, I'll make sure I have room, because we have two freezers. One's really big and the other one is moderate size. And I use that one for putting the grains in, because I can usually easily make room in there. So I can store a bunch of ice packs in there that I get from Misfits Market. And then because those are good for a lot of things, if you want to put them in a cooler, you're going out to the property, you're going to the beach or whatever, you got something to keep your stuff cool and you don't have to go buy ice. And then they keep the freezer full, so you're conserving energy. But then when I need that space for my grains, I just take those ice packs out, put the grains in there, and then I put the ice packs back in once I pull the grains out. Now, what will happen with that when you freeze it, if there's any weevil eggs inside your grains? See, the grains could be clean when you get them in, but you won't know if there could possibly be weevils that have laid their eggs inside the grains, because that's what they do. They lay inside the individual grains, and then the little larva will eat through the grain. Once it hatches, it will eat through the grain. And then you'll start noticing a lot of powdery stuff in your grains, and you're like, then if you start looking closer, you might see weevils. So freezing them will kill them in the grain, so you don't have to worry about it. Now, why would there be a concern even with high quality grains, and especially with high quality grains that are non-GMO and organic with weevils? Well, because they haven't been sprayed with pesticides, because they're non-GMO, you're going to be a little more likely to get weevils in there because you don't know when the weevils at any time in once they've been harvested, they can get a weevil in there that laid an egg, and all it takes is one, and you can end up, you know, getting weevils all through there. Now, weevils aren't going to hurt you. It's just kind of gross, the whole idea of it, but they're not going to hurt you. And people shouldn't be afraid of it, but you want to keep your grains as whole as possible, obviously. So freezing them, and then, for anywhere from 3 days to a week, just to make sure. And the reason I go for a longer period of time with a bigger bag is to make sure it freezes all the way through to the grains that are in the middle of the bag. And then what I do, just to make sure there's no moisture content once I pull them out of the freezer and let them come up to room temperature, is I will open the bag, I'll put it in a safe place, and then I'll put a cloth over it to keep dust and other things out. And then for a few days, I'll keep stirring those grains up and try to make sure I'm getting all the moisture out before I pack it up. Especially if you're going to pack it for long-term storage, because if there's any moisture in there, you could lose the whole batch, because then you're going to get mold. And so what I do for immediate use is I do keep them, because I buy in such, usually 25 to 50-pound bags. And then I keep them in large buckets. And since I get them from Azure Standard, and I appreciate, this is the other thing I really, really prefer about Azure Standard, is they pack their grains in paper bags rather than plastic, like one place I used to buy from did. And I will then just keep them in that paper bag rather than putting it in Mylar, because Mylar's basically plastic and metal. And so I would prefer not to have to put it in the Mylar bags, and they can get expensive, and just use the bags that already come in, because they're usually triple bagged. And then I'll just take that whole bag and set it down inside the bucket and work out of that bucket from there. Now, when it comes to long-term storage, that then is where the Mylar will come into play. So some people will like to use oxygen absorbers. I find them to be a complete waste of money and time, because you never know if the ones you get are actually going to work. It seems like I always end up with a bum batch. Not always, but most of the time. So I gave up on them. So as long as you're getting out as much of the oxygen as possible, they should be good. So I put the grains in the Mylar. I push it down and push it down, pushing out as much of the air as I can. And then I'll take a flat iron and then seal that Mylar. If you can get them, they do make the Mylar bags with the Ziploc. So you can always just do the Ziploc, and that way you might be able to use that bag again. Not always, because sometimes it can get holes worn in them. Hi, Diametra. But so you got to watch for that. But usually you can use it again, especially if you're getting a good heavy mill. I don't recommend buying anything less than 5 mil, and you can get higher than that. It's going to get more expensive the thicker the bag is, but you're going to ensure longer storage. That way, the bag is going to hold up longer. It's going to last longer. It's going to put up with a lot of stuff better than I don't even know what the thinnest one is. It 3 mil or less? I don't know. Because I've never bought anything less than 3 or 5, excuse me. But and then the CO2 thing, I'm glad Tyler brought that up, because I wanted to bring that up, but I don't know. So yeah, I wasn't sure of the procedure there. So I'll read his comment. So when I do this for the for the replay, because the chat doesn't always show up right away, but also when I do this for the other video, people can hear what he has to say. So you can store grain in 5-gallon buckets with a hamburger-sized piece of dry ice wrapped in a paper towel. CO2 will drive out the O2. So thank you, Tyler. I've heard of this. I've never done it, but I've heard of that. So, and I've heard it can be a very good method to use. And I think there's some others. So anyway, once I've got it, in the Mylar bag, I also still keep those in plastic buckets, and most of those get kept in an offsite location that is safe from rats and mice. But if you're going to store such things in a place that you're not sure are going to be safe from rats and mice, then I highly recommend going with galvanized garbage cans instead of the plastic buckets, because rats especially can and will chew through plastic. Now, the Mylar one, for a while there, I was thinking, okay, I'll just put them directly in the bucket. Why waste money on the Mylar? But then somebody brought up the fact that the Mylar bag, one of the other things it does is it helps reduce the possibility of the scent of the food that's in there getting out and catching the attention of rodents that will then want to chew through the plastic bucket. And if they can chew through the plastic bucket, they will most certainly chew through the Mylar. And yeah, so that will help in that way. It'll be a little bit of a deterrent, but I do still recommend using galvanized garbage cans. So obviously in this case, I'm talking about large amounts. I'm not going to go through the trouble of vacuum sealing the amount of grains that I put up. I'm not going to go through the trouble of vacuum sealing them all into jars, because that's going to take a ton of jars and all the biggest jars I can possibly find to do that. And that's going to be that'd be a lot of jars. So no, I don't use jars for vacuum sealing my grains. But if you're not interested in putting up the quantity that we do of your rice, your beans, your lentils, then yes, you can vacuum seal into jars. No need for oxygen absorbers in that case, because you're already vacuum sealing. So does pulling a vacuum on a bag of flour cause problems for a vacuum sealer? I would be concerned it would. That because the flour is going to go into, could possibly get in there and destroy it. I've wondered about that myself. Yeah, definitely something to think about. So Tyler says steel 55-gallon barrels work great with the clamp rings to hold the lids tight. So there you go with that too. For some people, it might be cheaper and easier just to get your galvanized garbage cans from Walmart or wherever is carrying them that's close to you. But I haven't gone that route because we haven't needed to, but it's definitely just had to sit through 2 commercials. I'm not sure why you shouldn't have had to sit through 2 commercials. I'm not sure why. I'm sorry about that. Not unless you just came in. If you just came in, there'll be a commercial only as it starts. You shouldn't be seeing commercials midstream, because I select to put them in by hand while the stream is playing live, and then I just don't put any commercials in. But then when it's processing, after it's no longer live, well, it doesn't do that while it's processing either, but once it's done processing, if I don't get in there right away, because I never know how long it's going to take, then it'll show commercials once it's done. But it can take all night long for it to get done. Sometimes it only takes 15 minutes to a half an hour. But I try to keep checking it throughout the evening, but at some point I still have to go to bed. Then it's first thing I do in the morning when I get up, I check, see, is this done processing, so I can remove mid-roll ads. But yeah, you'll see commercials when you first come in here. I mean, I got to make a little bit of money for the time that goes into this, which is a fraction of minimum wage. I'll just let you know that. A fraction. So anyway, she's probably talking about just coming in here. I've heard putting a bay leaf in the buckets helps. Yes, Bay leaves are supposed to help, but I wouldn't but don't bet the bank on it. Don't bet all your grains on it. I've used bay leaves before. It does not kill them. It just helps prevent them. If you've already got weevils in there, it's not going to do a darn bit of good. Another thing you can do is put diatomaceous earth into your grains because it's good for you anyway. You won't be able to taste it, but it will also help kill. That will actually help kill weevils if they start hatching out. But I still wouldn't even bet all your grains on that either. I know this from experience. So, yeah. But with my case, it was because I realized too late I had weevils in a bucket of spelt. And they were past the point that anything was gonna work. No, not the bay leaves, not the diatomaceous earth. It might have killed some of them, but they were populating too fast by that point. So I had to just feed the whole bag to my chickens. Let the and they got the weevils and the grains, so they were happy. It was a bummer, but hey, at least it wasn't a complete and utter waste. So let's see. Now, there was something else here. Okay, I talked about the differences. I talked about the freezing, oxygen absorbers, mylar buckets, trash cans, etc. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about grinding grains. And I'll talk about what I use. And I did go ahead and link to it in the description box. However, please note it is almost twice as expensive as it was when I bought it, and that is the Country Living Grain Mill. I absolutely love it. It's made right here in Washington State. So in the United States, it's built like a tank, is very solid. It's got a big grinding wheel on it, which makes it much easier for if you're going to crank by hand. The reason there's so many things I like about this and why to me it was worth it for me to spend that kind of money because I think when I bought it, it was around $400. Now it's almost $800. Um, but, because of how sturdy it was, because it was made in the US and even made in my own state, but because of that big wheel for grinding by hand, the bigger wheel is actually easier than a smaller wheel. But then also having the ability, because it's got the groove in the wheel, that you can, put any kind of belt in there and hook it up to something else, whether it be a treadmill or a bicycle, you know, what do you call it? An exercycle where, it's already stationary anyway. Or like Patrick did for me, he rebuilt an old motor and that thing's worked beautifully. And it's much, much faster anyway at grinding the flour because I can get a couple of cups of flour in maybe about 10 minutes, where that much flour, if I was to grind it all by hand, that would probably take me a couple hours to grind all that. It depends on the flour, it depends on the grain. Hard grains will go through the mill much faster. It's harder to grind it. There's more tension there as you're grinding it, but they go through the grain mill faster. So I think I figured I can do a cup in, actually it doesn't take me, I think it's only 5 minutes. I can do a couple cups of flour with the motor. But I think with the hard grains, it takes about 15 minutes to do a cup. And for the soft grains, it can take up to an hour per cup. That's why I like mixing the two soft and hard grains because it gets that good middle ground if you're grinding by hand. And that's going to be no matter what grain mill you get. But the thing is, having the ability to grind by hand is, let's say we don't have enough, maybe it's the middle of winter, we don't have enough solar power, you know, we don't have enough power in our bank, in our battery bank, because we're not getting enough solar power because it's short days. The solar panels have been covered with snow, or it's just been dark, dark, dark. Then I can grind by hand if I don't have any public power. So I like having the ability to do that. Someone mentioned vacuum sealing flour. I put 2 cups in white lunch sacks, fold over. There you go. Thanks, Brenda. That was another point I was gonna make. Now, as far as vacuum sealing into bags, maybe having a bag, the paper bag inside, that's a really good idea, because if you're vacuum sealing in jars, I always talk about when you're vacuum sealing powders into jars, you want some kind of barrier, some kind of paper or fabric barrier over the top of the powder before you, and then you put your lid on and then you vacuum seal it. That prevents that flour from coming out, and then putting a coating of flour on the rim of the jar. So the same with your Mylar bags, putting your flowers inside of a paper bag first is excellent, because there's going to be enough airflow in the paper bag. You can still vacuum seal it, but it will prevent the flour from coming through and then getting into your electric vacuum sealer, or also along the edge of the bag, and preventing a good seal that way. So very good, Brenda. Thank you for throwing that in there. I hadn't thought of that, because I stopped using my food saver years ago. I gave up on it. So sick and tired of those things. I loved them when I first got my first one, but after 4 of them, I'm like, okay, I'm done. I'm done. I'm not buying anymore. Thank you, Karen. Yeah, I've been trying to work on making it look pretty back there. That's the other reason why I like having the overhead lights off, not just because they're fluorescent, but because then I can make it look prettier back here. It stands out better. But, the overhead fluorescents just make a weird color, make me look far more washed out. My wife just told me you can vacuum seal flour in a jar if you put a coffee. Yep. Yep. Yeah, that's what I was talking about. So I use fabric. I use a piece of cotton fabric, because I always have fabric around here, and I just do that. And then if I open up that jar, I can just wash that fabric out. Because it's so small, I usually just wash it by hand, hang it to dry, and then I can use it again. But yeah, you can use coffee filter. You can use, and like I've said before, some people like using the muffin liners, the mini ones, because they fit perfectly in there, where a coffee filter can be a little big. But you can also cut paper towels up to fit anything, anything you feel safe using in your food. Over the top is a barrier. Any of that works. So there was something else I was going to say, about the grain mill thing. But yeah, I think, while I highly recommend the grain mill I have, I realize that is a massive expense, and it is not the only grain mill out there. There are smaller ones you can get that are hand crank, that aren't going to break the bank. They're Just keep in mind, they will take a little longer, but at least it's still something. And then you can get some electric ones. I've heard a lot of good things about the Wonder Mill. Even though I haven't heard much about it in the past several years, I know that Zach and Jamie were using the Wonder Mill. I don't know if he still uses it, but I know that's what Jamie was using when she was grinding up her grains for flours, and she loved it. And there's a local lady that has, I think hers is a Wonder Mill. I know it's electric, and it just takes a couple of minutes to get a cup of flour. It doesn't take all day. And though I know the Wonder Mill is still going to be expensive. I don't know what the cost of it is now, but it's going to be a lot cheaper, you know, a lot less in cost. Let me put it that way, than the Country Living grain mill. Is it made cheaper? I don't know, but I'm guessing it's probably mostly plastic, like the outside of it. But obviously, the grinding parts aren't going to be plastic, or they shouldn't be. What kind of oil does what? She laughed at me because I don't know the teaspoon, tablespoon conversion. So I said, what kind of oil? Oh, yeah. 3 teaspoons per tablespoon. But you know what? Even people who cook and bake don't always know that either. 3 teaspoons in a tablespoon, 4 tablespoons in a quarter cup. Obviously, 4 quarter cups in a cup, 4, yeah, 2 cups in a pint, 4 cups in a quart. I'm going to start losing it now. Anyway, but yeah. So I do recommend having, if even if you go with an electric version of a grain mill, still make sure you have a way to grind your flours just in case of a power outage and you're needing to grind up some flour because you want to make some bread, but now all you got is whole grains. So now here's the other thing though about my grain mill is the one I bought and the one I linked to actually came with the corn and bean auger, which is necessary because I like to buy the whole white organic non-GMO corn from Azure Standard. And that's what I use when I make the cornbread for the hillbilly, the Tar Heel beans and cornbread, because we use white cornmeal for that. And so I just keep the whole corn and then I'll grind. We'll every now and then we'll switch those plates out, maybe once a year or so. I'll grind up a bunch and then keep it in a jar like this with the bale wire that has a nice tight seal on it. And then once I work through it, then we'll do that again. But it's a bit of a hassle to change out the auger, but it doesn't take that long. I just have Patrick do it for me. I need to learn how to do it myself. Patrick, I need you to change out my auger. So anyway, let me go back to this question and before I miss it entirely, and then I want to finish talking about something. See, off-topic question I need to ask: made fire cider 10 more. I forgot about it. Would it still be good? It should be. It should be. I don't see any problem with it's if you're using vinegar, it should be preserved. It should be just fine, just like any kind of tincture. I mean, you think about whenever I make a tincture or an extract, whether I'm using homemade wine or anything else, I'll let it sit. Or if I'm doing like an oxy mill, which is half vinegar, half raw honey, then I never let anything sit for less than 2 months and usually longer. Usually I don't even bother straining anything until I'm ready to use it. So it can sometimes be a year later. Hey, it's good to see some people in here I haven't seen in a while. So, okay, I've been using my electric Nutrimill stone mill to grind all of my grains. I live off grid and have a generator as a backup to charge my battery bank if needed. So, yes, this is good to know. There's other brands out there. And unfortunately, I would love to share them all with you. I just don't know them all because all I know is what I've used and what I've seen other people use. So that's why I appreciate the the interaction, the comments in there about what people are using that they're happy with and has worked well for them. So I'm guessing the Nutrimill probably has a better price than the Country Living Grain Mill. So anyway, there was something else I was going to say about the grains and the milling and whatnot. But oh yeah, with the corn and bean auger, if you can get a grain mill that has that, you can not only use it for just like the dent corn, but you can use it for grinding popcorn into. That's what I've done with the popcorn I've grown because it's not great. The glass gem corn, at least when we grow it, it's not best for popping, but it's great for making cornbread. So we'll change out that corn and bean auger and just grind up a bunch of that, and it works great. And you can also, when it comes to just regular grains, you can also grind rice. You can make your own rice flour. You can make your own oat flour. I would recommend going with oat groats if you're going to do that rather than oats. They're going to go through the grain mill a lot better. If you have a peanut butter auger, then which we also have that. The company was nice enough to gift us one a few years back. And we've made peanut butter with it before, but you can make other types of nut butters, almond butter and whatnot. And you want that because you don't want to do that with a regular auger because it's just going to get too clogged up. That's why it's a special type of auger that goes in there. So, question, if you dehydrated meat, how long to keep in oven and or dehydrator? It's going to depend. It's going to depend on your temperature. It's going to depend on how you've got it cut up. You just check it. And it's also going to depend. Yeah, I already said temperature. Whenever I'm dehydrating meat, I usually set it at 125. That's the highest I ever go with my dehydrators. Even though you can go higher, you can set them higher. I never go higher than that, even for meat. But it typically doesn't take too long, but I don't, 125, maybe 10 to 12 hours, but it's also going to depend on how big the pieces of meat are. When I'm making jerky, which is something I'm going to marinate, typically I'm going to do this in the wintertime. That is something I do on the wood stove with my special wood stove rack, and that takes a good part of the day, but I rotate it. So I can't, when people ask me to give exact times and all that, there's too many variables that I can't tell you that. I mean, I never even just go by an exact time, even if I've done it many times, because it's better to keep checking on something. And the more you do it, though, the more you'll get comfortable with how long it takes, and you'll figure it out. But yeah, so I think I made a batch of jerky this year. I did. I did. I think. I want to get more done. I need to probably get on that if I'm going to get more done before the warmer weather comes. Then again, we typically have fires going clear up through May. And sometimes, like, we might take breaks and might get a hot stretch in May and not have fire, and then all of a sudden it will get really cold again. So we've actually last summer before, we had fires going clear up until July. That's how cold it stayed. And the gardens were way behind. I didn't care last year because I wasn't planting anything last year. It's giving my garden a sabbatical. Let's see. Did I have another question before I continued on? I had a couple more things I wanted to say. Okay, no. I think I had a couple more things I wanted to say. I think I covered all my main points there. Let's talk a little bit about bread making, especially now for those who keep Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which we just started doing last year. I think it was last year was our first year, I think. Last year, I came up with a few recipes for unleavened bread. Now, the thing is about learning how to make flatbreads, it's a great practice whether you celebrate Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread or not, doesn't matter, because learning some good flatbread recipes in the event you want something that's faster, quicker, you don't have time to make yeast breads, you don't want to mess with sourdough, maybe you're out of yeast, whatever the case may be, it's a good idea to have some good flatbread ideas. And so I did link in the description box to the video I did a year ago on some different types of flatbreads, unleavened breads I was making, and the benefits of just having some of this, knowing how to do some of this. And this includes tortillas. Even though I typically would put baking powder in my tortillas, I'm like, why? Because it was based on a recipe I got years ago, and I realized this is pointless. It's a flatbread. It doesn't need baking powder. So you just leave it out. So you can make tortillas. You can make I've got my cracker bread recipe that I create. I have a cracker bread recipe that Deb came across. She's just like, wait a minute, this has yeast in it. She was like confused. It's because I have an older one. And that one does have yeast in it because the whole idea is it's supposed to get really puffy and it's really good and crispy. But that cracker bread recipe I made up last year with the seeds, it's all whole grains. So my barley and hard white wheat with seeds added like chia and flax and poppy seed. And what else did I put in there? I think I put black seed in there too. And then it's so good. My grandbabies loved the cracker bread, especially Jace. He just wanted to eat one after another after another. And so I made quite a bit of that. And then I made kind of just a more of a thicker flatbread, like some people call it like naan, kind of like that. I don't know exactly what that is because I've never made it. I've just seen pictures of it. I'm like, oh, that looks similar. And tried doing that in place of like, just to have something softer. Like you could use it for sandwiches, like making a grilled cheese sandwich would be really good. So anyway, I did link to the video I did last year on some different ideas for unleavened breads, as well as the short I did last year with the cracker bread. And the written recipe to the cracker bread is in both of those videos that I link to in the description box. If you guys would like to check those out, whether you celebrate Passover and unleavened bread or not, doesn't matter. You may still enjoy those because the cracker bread, I'm really looking forward to making that. I'm saving it for that so we can appreciate it a lot more. But yeah, and then some other ideas as far as, for those who do want to do the whole week of unleavened bread, of dinner ideas I didn't think of last year until I was going through the latest Torah Sisters where they're talking about some ideas for meals. And that was like, a pot pie. Well, I make pot pies a lot. I'm like, why didn't I think about that? Because that's an unleavened bread, the pie crust. And so, yeah, I'll be making at least one pot pie during the week, a chicken pot pie. My favorite is beef or any kind of red meat. So I'll probably make some kind of pot pie for that week. And I've made jerky out of venison, elk, and beef. I've used all three. I like all three. Um, I prefer elk over venison, though venison is really good. But the very first jerky I ever made was made from venison. It was from the deer that Patrick got that year. And I thought, I really want to try making jerky. And I didn't even have a dehydrator, and my wood stove wasn't set up in such a way. We just had the insert, so no way I could really use that for making the jerky. So I just did it in the oven. Just did it in the oven. It was easy. Super easy. I prefer moose over any. You know what, Tyler? I have a feeling I would really like it, but I've never had the opportunity to try it. I really, really want to try it. I just got to hook up with the right people who go moose hunting, but they typically go up to Alaska. And I don't know how many people around here do that because we get a lot of elk and venison around here. So a lot of people aren't going to bother paying the money to do a trip just to go get a moose, but then some do. I knew a guy in my Taekwondo class that when we were driving to Port Angeles that would go moose hunting at least maybe once a year. But no mooses in here in Australia. Or is it meeses or meese? Okay, so I think that was it. I think I covered all my points and I got through them all without being cut off by YouTube. Yay! Thank you, YouTube. So now hopefully I can do my closing when I'm ready without being cut off from that. You know what I should do? I should say my closing and then stay and just chat for a little bit. Do I have a favorite pie crust recipe? Tammy Harder asks. I have a couple videos, I think, on making pie crusts. I do have one for those who need to be gluten-free that I did, I think, a year or so ago. Took me a while to develop that one, but I wanted a gluten-free pie crust so I could make pies for, when we're going to do a meal with people who are gluten-free. I wanted to know I can make them at least a pie because that was since I was in my teens, making pies were my thing. That was my spiritual gift was making pies, and made them for everything. Every meal, that I got invited to, make a pie, make a pie. So to me, to be able to make a pie crust that was gluten-free took some practice to get it to turn out as close to my regular pie crust as possible. But I don't follow a strict recipe these days. I just spit on my mic. I don't follow a strict recipe these days. Because I've done it for so long that I just go by feel. I put my flour in there. I add my shortening and butter, and I don't even measure it. I just put I just bloop. Oh, here's some. And when I say shortening, I mean palm shortening, organic, not Crisco. I stopped using that many years ago. But so I'll use my organic palm shortening, which I now get from Azure Standard, and some organic butter, and about half and half of the amounts. I just kind of bloop them in there, start cutting it in, and I've already got the salt in there. And I can tell by the feel, oh, needs more fat. I'll add a little bit more. So I do have some videos, but I don't have exact ratios other than if you're talking about A single pie crust, when it comes to salt, is a half teaspoon of salt for each single pie crust. So if you're making a pie crust for, a 2 crust pie, it's a teaspoon of salt. And even that I don't measure. I just pour it in my hand and go, "Yep, that looks right." Because I've been doing it for so long. I know how it should look, I know how it should feel. I know all that when I'm working with it. So for me, it's more the experience. So Terminator says, "We have moose in our backyard, but to hunt them, you have to have enough points now. The ministry changed everything for hunting." Mm, figures. Oh, the ministries. The ministries help us so much. We have our own ministries, of course. They just don't call them that here, but they might as well. So, yeah, I grew up with Crisco too, but unfortunately, it is bad news. There's better options. If you want the closest thing to Crisco, get a good palm shortening, organic. Like I said, Azure Standard has it. Or if you can't do Azure Standard, Vitacosta is a really good place to get it too. It's going to be way more expensive than Crisco, but it's going to be a lot healthier for you. And it works great. Yes, I get my wild rice from Azure Standard. I thought I answered that question. Maybe this is a different person asking. All my grains now, all of them, I get from Azure Standard. All my grains, all my flours. I still have some like buckwheat. Actually, let me take that back. I prefer the buckwheat flour from Anthony's Goods, the organic buckwheat flour, because the Azure Standard buckwheat flour has the holes in it. It's not going to hurt you. I just don't like the color. I try to sift a bunch of it out. It's totally not going to hurt you. I just don't like the color it makes the bread. So I sift a whole bunch of it out. I just take I don't have an actual sifter. I have just like a fine mesh strainer, stainless steel, and I'll pour the flour through there and sift it out. And it gets quite a bit of it out, but I won't buy that again. That's the only thing I wasn't really happy about. So the Anthony's Goods on Amazon has a really good buckwheat flour. Which I do still like using buckwheat flour. It's so good for you. It's very, very healthy. So even though I don't have to cook gluten-free right now, I still like knowing I can do it in case I'm ever in that situation again where somebody needs that. So, oh, Patrick. Okay, Patrick. I was wondering what that sound was. He's out there running the dump truck. That's why the dogs are carrying on in the other room. So, yes, Diametra, when I was a young girl, I mean, I always loved pancakes and I would be happy to eat them without syrup as long as the pancake was good. I knew it was a good pancake if I could eat it with just butter on it, and I'd just be happy as a clam. Well, I was a teenager. I wasn't young, but we went out to eat somewhere and they had buckwheat pancakes. I'm like, I want to try that. I thought they were the best pancakes ever. Love buckwheat. It's good stuff. So for people who are gluten free and you're just finding out you need to be gluten free, buckwheat is an excellent option. But here's another thing too: is some people who are having issues with gluten find that they can go with the einkorn or the emmer, the ancient grains. They are a wheat, but they haven't been changed so much, and some people find they do better with those. So our gluten-free friends that I was talked about before, uh she's found that she can handle the einkorn. I don't know if she said emmer, but I know she said she can handle the einkorn. So I gave her some einkorn seed, which is just the grain, but I got from Azure Standard. So because I wanted to try growing it to see how well it will grow for us. So I gave her some to try as well because I ended up with a lot because I'm just going to try it. This year I'm going to try it, just a small patch of it to see if it will grow. I think I might try growing some barley too and see how well that does. Since all my grains are non-GMO and organic that I get from Azure, I shouldn't have any problem being able to at least try growing them as long as they like it here. I think it was an IHOP that I got those buckwheat pancakes, but that was years ago. I haven't eaten at IHOP in like 100 years, even though I'm not 100 years old. I haven't eaten there so long. I That might have been the last time I ever ate there, so I have no idea if their stuff is any good anymore. I would assume not because it seems like a lot of places use garbage and none of it's any good. What is the grain with the lowest carbs? Well, grains are gonna be high in carbs. I think maybe anything that's made from a non-wheat, like more of your, like buckwheat I would assume would be lower in carbs. You'd wanna get away from things like your spelt, your wheat, your barley, if that's an issue. But, just remember carbs are also important. They are a form of energy that our body needs. So there has to be a balance. I understand people having problems and cutting back, but it kind of comes. Thank you, Diametra. Thank you. I appreciate that. I've been feeling a lot better, by the way. I know I said this last week, but since I got back into my very serious, very stringent fasting regimen, and what I'm talking about is a combination of fasting 2 days a week, at least for now. I'm still doing that. I might eventually drop down to 1 day a week. I just don't want to do that yet. But I fast 2 full days a week, and that can be anywhere from 40 to 44 hours of time. So it's more than a full day. It's more than a day and a half. And then the other days a week, I'm doing intermittent fasting. So I'm only giving myself a window of anywhere from 3 to 5 hours, depending on if it was before or after one of my full fast days. If it was right after a full fast day, then usually I give myself a broader window, which makes sense because by that time it comes around, I'm like, I'm hungry now. I got to eat. But I tell you what, it's done wonders for the issues I've been having with my gut since, quite a few months ago. Well, I say quite a few months ago. It might be as long as 4 months ago now that something I think I caught something, and it's just I could not fully get rid of it, but the fasting and the intermittent fasting has helped, but it's helped me a lot in other ways too. So, yeah, I'm 100. No, I said something about, 100 years, even though I'm not 100. But I'll be 59 next month. So, and then next month is kind of a big month because it's like Rowan's birthday. So my youngest grandchild, at least for now, she's my youngest grandchild. And then my oldest son's birthday. My birthday's the day after his, and a few days later is our anniversary. And then early in April is my youngest son's birthday. It's crazy. It's crazy. So we'll be married next month, 35 years. And I'll be 59. And like I said, Patrick turned 60 this last summer. So yeah, I remember I was 50 years old when I started my channel. It was 2016. So it was a good way to kick off that decade. Well, I started in the summer. My birthday's obviously it's in March, but oh wow. Yeah, Billy. I hear ya. I hear ya. It just bam, bam, bam. But you know what? It's like I said the last time I brought this up. It's like when I was planning our wedding, I wasn't even thinking about when my birthday was. Honestly, that was not because I was already teaching dance by that point. And what I was thinking is, okay, I want to try to plan our wedding around what's going to be the best time to where I can take a week off from my classes. And I thought, well, it would make sense to get married the Saturday before spring break since a lot of kids are going to be gone during that time anyway. Well, that year, spring break was like April 1st through whatever, April 7th, 8th, whatever. And so obviously it made sense to get married on the 31st, which was that Saturday just before that. So that then I could easily take that whole week off for a honeymoon and not worry about it. So it wasn't until I was my vocal cords or my nodules are swelling. I don't know if you guys can hear. I can hear it. It starts getting this weird sort of rough, raspy sound. That's what's happening. So you're going to hear me coughing more, and I'm probably going to have to get off soon. But at any rate, so I'm at the church on my birthday, which was the Friday before, because I needed to get some stuff done then. And I'm there, we're getting some of the decorations set up, because that was a good night to do it. And that might have also been the dinner, whatever you call it, rehearsal dinner. We didn't do the rehearsal then, did we? Whatever. I just remember I was at the church, or maybe it was just the day after my birthday, and somebody walked in and said, "Well, happy birthday." And I'm like, "Happy birthday? Oh my goodness, what was I thinking? I'm planning my birthday around my wedding around my birthday?" But you know what? It's been cool, because we don't make a massive deal about birthdays anyway. In fact, our own birthdays, we don't do much. I might make Patrick some raspberry turnovers, because the raspberries are ready by that point, or wild blackberry turnovers. But yeah, it's just not a big deal. But it made it easier for Patrick, because he just knows our birthday and anniversary are all kind of right there. And so we'd just do something for our anniversary and call it good. That's fine with me. I didn't care. I realized it wasn't a big deal. But I certainly also did not plan to have a child the day before my birthday. But hey, it happens. It makes it easier for him to remember my birthday, because he knows when his birthday is, and he knows mom's birthday is the day after. So that makes it easy. But I never ask my kids very. It's like, don't do anything for my birthday. I mean, they still do, but I tell them not to. But at least they still like mom enough to do something nice for her. So anyway, yeah, you know what, guys? I think I'm gonna have to get off here. It's my throat's starting to hurt. Not badly, but it's getting more and more sore, and it's only gonna continually get worse if I keep sitting here yammering, flapping at the gums, as Patrick would say. You get to pick dinner. There you go. There you go. So anyway, I'm glad I got through this stream. Thank you, Lord, and thank you, YouTube, as well, for not cutting me off in midstream. And I hope you guys have a wonderful, blessed rest of your Sunday and rest of your week. I may or may not be here Wednesday for the Q&A. I may have plans, but I'll keep you updated, and you will know if you see a scheduled show that I'll be here. But if I'm not, don't worry. It's because I had to go take care of business, such as renewing my stupid driver's license. And I have to do it in person. Makes me mad. Anyway, yes. So love y'all. Take care, and God bless. See ya.